Hello, I'm Rena, aka DuneFoxx. If you're new here, welcome, and if you've been here before, nice to see you again. Today, I'm going to be unboxing the Soshiro Hoshina Luminasta price figure from SEGA. And like I said, it is a price figure, so I'm not going to get that into it like I do with scale figures. But I figured I'd talk about it a little because I don't see a lot of people talk about quality when they do unboxings of these. Pricing for price figures vary. There's really no set MSRP because you don't buy these, at least not in the traditional sense. Price figures are figures you typically win from crane games in Japan, and it can take you anywhere from 1 try to 20 tries to God knows how many, but on average, people spend about 2,000 yen or about 13 or 14 US dollars before winning a prize. And if you're buying from a US seller, not a marketplace like eBay, it is safe to assume that they would double that and sell the figure anywhere from 26 to 35 US dollars. I got mine from Hot Topic because I missed the pre-order from the shops I normally get my figures from. Normally, I would scour the Japanese online marketplace for price figures to get them sooner because it typically takes 2 to 3 months for these figures to hit the US market after they've been released. And they are a lot cheaper there, especially if you buy multiple figures and consolidate a package to save on shipping. But anything and everything Hoshina was selling out at the time, I didn't want to risk missing out on the figure, and so I pre-ordered mine from Hot Topic. I got mine for 35 US dollars total with tax and no shipping because I opted for in-store pickup, which is a great option to save a little bit of money if you have a store near you. The official release date for this figure was June 28, 2024, and my pre-order shipped to the store around September 18, so almost 3 months after it was released. If you buy a lot of price figures, you'll know that more often than not, when you open the box, you'll usually find a cardboard insert and a long roll of plastic with each part of the figure compartmentalized. I don't really know if there's a term for that kind of packaging or if I'm describing it properly, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. So I'm very happy that this figure is packed like a scale figure in a plastic insert where all the individual parts are secure, and the base is in a bag taped to the bottom of the insert. The base of the figure is plain black with 2 holes. It measures about 90 millimeters. I know a lot of people find these boring, but I actually prefer these to the bases with logos and prints because it gives a more uniform look when you display multiple figures together. The main figure is wrapped in plastic and comes in one solid piece. It has a peg under each foot. First impression, I think it looks pretty good. For a price figure, it feels pretty solid. I had no problem attaching him to the base. As with most price figures, they are pretty easy to assemble. The pegs under each foot just go into the holes on the base. Pretty straightforward. The figure also comes with the SW2033 or his dual blades, and they're actually very detailed, but they're just completely black in a sort of matte finish. I had to look at product photos to figure out how to put these in the right way, and even then I was a little unsure because I had to really jam these in, and I definitely felt the ridges on the hilt as I'm doing so. I was definitely worried about the paint, but the dual blades themselves are very secure and I don't have to worry about them falling out or coming loose. Now that it's assembled, it does feel like a pretty solid figure. It has a good weight to it. So I'm just going to quickly go through my thoughts and comments. According to the SEGA description of the Luminasta line, it's a line of figures that gives each character their own unique shining feature. And on the product page for Soshiro here, The shining feature is supposed to be the realistic reproduction of his combat suit, aka GX4552, and his cool looking back pose. My first thought is the product photos really don't do this figure any justice. I was honestly surprised by how this figure looked right out of the box. His left shoulder doesn't look as weird as in the product photos, and he's not actually looking back, more like sideways, which makes the figure look a lot better when you're displaying him. His face is really nice. This is where most price figures lose me, but this figure actually looks like Soshiro. So let's talk about the combat suit, because this is supposed to be the main feature. I gotta say, it's very detailed, down to the accessories on it, like the gun and holster on his right hip, the sheaths on his lower back for his dual blades, the stun grenades and pouches on his left hip, and the thigh rig. The boots also caught my attention. It just looks really good, though I'm not sure why this part of the boot is glossy. It's the only part of this figure that has a different finish. And speaking of finishes, I love the sort of matte finish. I'd say it's not completely matte because it does have a little sheen to it, but definitely not glossy. I don't know if it's just me or my figure, but the black on his right arm has a little more sheen to it than the rest of his body, but it's not that noticeable. The paint job is really where most, if not all, price figures take a hit. There's always going to be a problem with a paint job. I could have 10 of these figures lined up and some will look better than others, but there will definitely be something wrong with the paint. I think my particular figure is a good example of a price figure with a messy paint job. You definitely see it here on the spine-like armor on his back. The gray paint spilled, the lines are not crisp. There's also black paint smeared on parts that are supposed to be all gray. The smaller gray parts are definitely the messier parts in terms of paint on this figure. Now, both shoulder armor have two logos on it. The bigger one is for Izumo Tech, and the text underneath is for Tobatsuto, or the Neutralization Bureau. At first glance, it might look messy or even look like it's scratched off, but the actual logo for Izumo Tech actually looks a little bit distressed, so this is quite accurate. I'd say most of the paint issues on this figure are limited to the waist up because of all the small details, but honestly, it's only really noticeable in this video because I've zoomed in on it. So should you pick this up? It's a really nice figure. He has great muscle definition that you can see through the suit. His face and hair look great. The pose is pretty good too. Definitely looks better than in the product photos. I barely noticed the messy paint job from 2 feet away. If the paint job doesn't bother you, definitely pick this one up. It's a pretty solid price figure. Just don't spend more than $40 on it.